disciples that they should cast it out, but they could not. He answered, and I start shaking my head because I believe Jesus started shaking his head. "O faithless generation, how long shall I bear with you? How long must I bear with you or be with you? Bring the boy to me." Then they brought him to him, and when he saw him, immediately the spirit convulsed him, and he fell on the ground and wallowed, foaming at the mouth. Now, to this point, the boy is not healed. And they're standing here having a theological discussion, and there's a kid in the river drowning. And they're debating over the ability to cast out demons and what name do you cast them out in. And they're having a theological debate, and the dad is involved in it. And it's just like, yeah, it happens all the time. He's laying here gnawing his teeth off, convulsing on the ground, and they are discussing the theology behind it. Do you see why I think this is nuts? I'm sorry, some of you don't know that word. Is that what you would be doing with your child, or would you not be trying to get help desperately for them? And see, today we'd rush them to the emergency room. I'm not against that. I'm just telling you, when it's spiritual, you better be rushing them to a different emergency room. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm pointing at it. Spiritually, you need to get to the emergency room. Now, I'm sorry, I got to find where it was and keep reading. So he asked the father, "How long has this been happening?" He says, "Oh, from his childhood." He says, "Often he's thrown him into both the fire and the water." See, he's been in the river. They got him out. Thrown him into the fire and the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, see, he's given Jesus, he's the list of one of the possibilities. If you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. Now it's about to change. I'm just telling you, it's about to change. Because look at what Jesus says. Jesus said to him, "If you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes." Immediately, the father of the child cried out. What happened? What happened that made this change happen? He went from having a theological debate, and then Jesus said, "It's about your faith, Dad. It isn't about the ability of my disciples or the ability of the scribes. It isn't about the law. It isn't about what name. It's about you and your faith. And if you can pray and believe, this demon's gone." And that father reeled back and said, "This has been going on my son's whole life, and it's my fault because I have never cried out to God for help. Then I'm crying out." Somebody right then should have said, "Woo, good preaching, preacher." But you missed a good chance. That's okay. I'm going to give you another one here in a few minutes. Immediately, the father of the child cried out with tears and said, "Lord, I believe. Help mine unbelief." See the torn position? I don't know if it can happen or not. I don't really know if this can happen or not. But if you're telling me I've got to believe, then I'm telling you I believe. I'm torn. I'm not worthy. I can't be asking you to do something like this. But if it requires me, then Lord, I'm crying out, "Help my son." Jesus said, "That was good. I heard you. That was great, Dad. You did good." And he rebuked that unclean spirit and said, "Deaf and dumb spirit, I command you, come out of him and enter him no more." Woo! Deliverance came that day. Deliverance came that day. Some of you are sitting here, you're already, your guts, your inward being is twisted right now. Because you know you've struggled and you've been torn and you've wrestled with something in your life, some of you since your childhood. And I just told you the answer. And you're saying, "Please, preacher, give me another one." Read another verse that says that I can go home, go into my closet, close the door, and think in my head that if only I can believe in the secret place, if only I can go to the place where nobody else has to know. If I cry out and nothing happens, what's that going to do to God? I don't want to be embarrassing God. God's up to it. God's okay. Don't worry about embarrassing God. Now I got to give you one more. Whoo! He began to cry out with tears. It got real, and it got real fast. Help was there. His desperation brought the aid of Jesus. We can sit in here and have long theological debates over all kinds of things, but until you call on Jesus, that's all we're doing. Amen. Now, I think it's just one page over. Mark chapter 10, 46 through 52. Mark, is it up there? Yeah, came to Jericho. Now they came to Jericho, and as they went out of Jericho, as he went out of Jericho with his disciples and a great multitude, blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, sat by the road begging. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to think about his situation. God knows my blindness. This must be His plan for my life. I'll just sit here quietly as Jesus passes by and listen for some spiritual insight He might share. I don't think so. See, I already read to you, our Father knows what we have need of even before we ask. So Bartimaeus should have said, my blindness must be the will of God. For He knows my circumstance. He knows my situation. And if I began to make a scene, why, it would be an embarrassment. And the last thing I want to do is cause some kind of an embarrassing scene around my friends from here in Jericho. What verse is that we're reading? 47? 10:47. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out. He didn't say, excuse me, excuse me, Jesus, I know you're busy. Jesus. Jesus, if I could have a moment of your time just as you pass by very quickly, Jesus. I don't think so. He was a blind man. And he thought in his inner being, I have one shot at this. He may never come this way again. And guess what? He wasn't coming back to Jericho. He was on his way to Jerusalem to die. He wasn't coming back. Bartimaeus was in the river. Bartimaeus was tired. Bartimaeus was desperate. And so he did what anybody who was drowning in the river would do. Jesus! Hey, Jesus! Woo! Jesus! Woo! Jesus! Now, see, I know all of you are concerned that if somebody next to you gets desperate, you're going to be uncomfortable. They were too. Let's read a little more. 40 whatever. 8. Then many warned him to be quiet. Hush, man. That's the mayor's with him, for crying out loud. Hush. We'll get you some more pencils to sell next week. Would you shut your mouth? You're embarrassing me. Yeah, and you can see. Jesus! It says he yelled all the more. He got louder. They're embarrassed to put something in that guy's mouth. What are you doing? And then Jesus stopped and said, what in the world is that? I've heard coons fighting in the woods. It sounds worse than that right there. What is that sound I hear? Look at what the same people who moments before were telling him to be quiet, look what they say to him. Be of good cheer. When Jesus shows up, they get happy. How many of you have ever been at church? Somebody does something that you think's a little bit nuts, then they get blessed, you get blessed, and you say, woo, that was all right.